Good morning. Good morning. Hello, Heather. How are you?
Good. Good evening for
Good.
you.
Yes, it is. It is a good evening down under. Hello, Steve. Hello, Marlies.
Marilis.
Marlies. Marlies. Okay. Hey, nice to have you here. There's Muddy. Got a few people waking up, turning on, and getting their Obvio on. This is an opportunity to ask questions about making Obvio work for you. If you're wrestling with something in particular that you want to ask questions about, it can be anything. You may think that it's a very basic question, or you might think it's a really advanced question. Whatever it is, there is no question out of bounds as far as Obvio goes. We then have we're always like questions about how you're thinking about doing your events online, and if you're wanting some tips or throw around some ideas, we'd love to do that. And then inevitably, there's some production questions that come up, some gear, bits and pieces, and things that you're thinking about. How do I make this work? And we're always up for talking about those sorts of geeky things as well. So that's generally the flow of how it will work. You can ask questions on the dashboard that you just came through. There's a ask question button. If you hit that, that sends it opens a form, and then you put the question in, and then that comes into a back end system for us, so we can manage the questions a little. And then you can also chat in the Zoom chat that you'd be used to. And we tend to keep the questions in the question system so that we don't lose them. And then we still monitor the chat a little too. You may have some follow-up questions or something that's related to what we're talking about right at that time. It tends to work quite well to separate them out like that. So that's how that works. And I think we already have a few questions, Heather.
Yeah. So the first one is from Marilis. Is there a limit to the number of people that can attend an event in any one Zoom room? I know we can have up to 500 people in attendance for free, and we'll be charged $100 for every 250 thereafter. But how many Zoom rooms do I need if I have 6,000 attendees? Can I host them all in one room, or do I need to split them up between rooms?
It's a great question, and a good problem to have, right? When you're dealing with lots of numbers. So there is a limit, and the limit is 1,000, 1,000 per room active in the meeting at the time. And so because we use meeting and not Zoom webinar at all, there is that's a limit that Zoom has. Years ago, they had 3,000 that you could get into a meeting, but they don't want to do that anymore, apparently. So 1,000 is the limit, and so then that's why we have our whole system of managing multiple rooms, multiple meetings within an area. And so that's what we call an area. You might call an area the main stage, and then you'd have multiple meetings under that area. And then the system will automatically load balance across those however meetings that you have. So let's say, for example, that you have, yeah, just unmute and fire away if you like.
Yeah. So when you're done, because you're on a
I'm on a trajectory.
Yeah, there we
Yeah,
go.
I don't want to bore you with it all, but I'll step through a little bit. So, with 1,000 people per room, one of the things that we changed recently that you may have heard is that we are only counting the people that actually are active, that actually show up to your event. So if they hit the dashboard, then that's when we count that they are an attendee, which is really good, particularly if you're running free events. That the show up rate is quite low. Now we find that even paid events, the show up rate is never 100%. or seemingly never 100%. And so the numbers always kind of vary a little bit as to how many people not only show up once for your event, but how many people are on simultaneously, concurrently. And so, and that's the thing that you're thinking about when you're working out how many rooms you need to have open. Another consideration and thing that we have on lots of our events is that we use breakout rooms, and so we break our attendees all into smaller groups. You have a maximum of 100 breakout rooms per meeting, and so at 1,000 with 100 breakout rooms is 10 per room, which we find to be too many people for a quality breakout room, depending on what you're doing. But so, which is why often where we have our rooms sitting around 400, 500, 600 people, so that we can break into breakout rooms of 4 or 5 or 6 people. And so that number around 5 for breakout rooms is really good. Now, could be that you're not doing breakout rooms at all, and that's not a concern. And so now you're probably counting on having maybe 900, 950 people in your room, and thinking about how many rooms you need to do that. What you'll probably want to do, the good thing about the add-ons for the extra attendees is that they kind of sit in a bank. And so once you buy a group of, or a number of those add-ons, and they'll sit in the bank until you use them. And so if you bought too many and not as many people show up, then it won't use that. It'll only use and count them when they're actually showing up as attendees that have shown up.
Okay,
yep.
cool. So
Far away.
that's great. If you don't mind me asking, okay, so if I've got potentially up to 6,000 people attending over 5 days, all right, so there's different workshops, there's different, so it's all one event, different sessions. Like at what point do I have to already do I have to set up additional Zoom rooms, for example, taking into account that I might have 1,020 people, for example, as in like, I have to pre-plan this and have like additional Zoom rooms open already, just in case I have more than 1,000 at any one point.
Yes, you do. Yes. So the experience of going over 1,000 will be that they will get a Zoom error, and that says that they can't enter the meeting. There's too many attendees.
Okay, cool. And yeah, carry on.
Yeah. So what you do is you set up the rooms, but you may not necessarily turn them on, right? So, or open them. So there's a few considerations here. One is, and we can come back to this afterwards, but remember also that Obvio is handling your attendees getting into those meetings. You have to think about how you're getting your production into each one of those meetings, because Obvio is they're not tied together in any way. They're managed across, the attendees are managed across those multiple rooms, but the way that you get your content into that room needs to be individual for each one of those rooms. And so, so in your main stage area, as example, you may say, we're expecting to get 2,000 at least, and so you could open 3 rooms perhaps, and you might have 6 rooms total ready. And when you're seeing the numbers, you could turn them on and turn them on as you go, or you could just say, when we think we have 6,000, we might only get 3,000, but it doesn't matter whether there's 300 people in a room or 600 people in a room. Everything else is the same anyway. So let's just open all the rooms and let it balance across all those rooms and give some flexibility on breakouts if you were to do that.
That's brilliant. Thank you. With regards to the billing, let's just say I'm sitting on 520 at the moment, am I automatically billed at that point in time, or do I have to go and purchase the add-on before the event? So it's all about like pre-planning.
It is about pre-planning. What would happen is if you didn't have an add-on and your numbers go above whatever that number is, the first one would be 500, then it won't stop the person being able to enter, but it will sort of lock out the admin section until you go and purchase the add-on. So because of that, and because you don't want to be dealing with that mid-show, then doing a calculation and buying some add-ons is certainly the best way to go. But at least you know that it's not going to all break. If it does go over, it just means you're keeping an eye on it, and you can go in, and when you go to make a change in the admin, it's going to say, hang on, you need to pay for a new add-on to do that. So, and also, there's not sort of an automatic system for refunding, but if it was something where you were like, you overshot it by a whole bunch and you bought a bunch of add-ons, then you could send an email to our help@ovv.io, and we'd be happy to refund them afterwards. Hopefully that's not the case, and that you you have everyone that you're expecting to come.
Okay, awesome. You mentioned the production, which I actually did submit this question. I know Heather's got it on her side, but the question was, I'm not clear on how to brief my production team in terms of how to set up the audio and the visual stream to Obvio, like one room, but not just one room, but multiple rooms.
Sure. Let me
And
ask
how do I tech test this? Sorry. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Great questions. Let me ask a couple of questions about your event to get an idea about this. You said that there was multiple sessions. It's a 5-day event. Is it a paid event?
No, so it's free with the option to upgrade to VIP experience.
VIP. Yep. Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll have the main stage. I've got VIP sessions. I've got private sessions for existing like students in the program. Okay. So I've got 3 different, I suppose, sessions to coordinate throughout 5 days.
And would you, from an interaction point of view, breakout rooms, were you thinking of using breakout rooms with the attendees, or what are you thinking there?
So the client hasn't decided as yet in terms of whether or not she wants to use the breakout room. So the PAG hasn't been like finalized. Okay.
Great. So the breakout rooms doesn't make a big difference to production. It does in the sense of if you've got 6 rooms, then you need kind of people that are pressing the buttons in each one of those rooms to activate all the breakout rooms. But the other key question is there a plan for interaction, sort of people unmuting and being able to talk as part of the show, part of the event?
On the VIP sessions, yes. And on the sessions with existing students, yes.
Okay. And so would they be all in the same meeting potentially, as in the VIPs could all be in the same Zoom and maybe the previous attendees?
So that would be the best thinking, is actually making sure the VIPs all go to the same room, existing students go to the same room, and then everybody else go into one room. So that's also why, but you answered that question in terms of like pre-planning how many rooms I'm going to need, and taking into account that, let's just say I've got 1,200 newbies that I might split up into 2 rooms, where everybody else, I could fit the VIPs into one, and I could fit existing students into another.
Okay, great. And so then it would be potentially 2 rooms that you would want to be able to have that live interaction going on, right?
Correct.
Is the number of VIPs, I mean, I guess you don't know how many people are going to upgrade. What I'm thinking of was whether you could combine those into one, whether the previous attendees and the VIPs into one, and now you've only got one meeting that you're doing that interaction with. That's something to think about. But so let me work up from the complexity angle, right? So the reason I ask all of those questions is the more meetings that you have that you want to be able to have people talking, there's the complexity is that you're having someone speak from one meeting for that to be heard in all the other meetings. And then depending on if someone else can speak from another meeting and everyone hears, back again. So there's a lot of audio routing in that. And it sounds like you have a production team that would not be terribly complex. It's just understanding as you build out a system like this, when you go from one meeting that just has your video and audio going in and then the audio coming out, that's very easy. It's what we're doing right now. The complexity comes when you start saying, okay, let's add another meeting. So let's add another meeting that only is a listen only, right? So, okay, now that means that we are essentially doing like a TV broadcast rather than it just being a simple Zoom meeting with, webcams and whatever. Now we're thinking, okay, I want to mix a broadcast and then send the audio and video into two separate places, which means that we need some sort of system that's able to distribute that across the multiple rooms, and but it could be exactly the same, and that's why I'm asking around. That there's always separating in your mind about what is a Zoom meeting that's part of the show and what is a Zoom meeting that's just watching the show. And when you think of it like that, it actually is really helpful. Often on our larger shows, we will have a separate speakers meeting, for example, right? So people that are a part of the show that are contributing are in a separate Zoom meeting that is only for our speakers. And that's part of producing our show. We're then mixing that show together and then broadcasting it into one or many other Zoom meetings. Is this making sense? Is that kind of
okay,
a
so
little bit?
well, yes and no. As in when I'm just thrown off a little bit here when you say like speakers are in one room. If I'm hosting an event with only one speaker, but like multiple rooms, are we saying that my speaker needs to go into one room and then we're streaming from that room to the other rooms? Is that what you're saying?
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, Muddy, feel free to jump in. The often with a show like this, there's lots of advantages to having our speakers sit in another room because we can talk to them and we can go back and forth, and they're not we're not trying to do that with other attendees in that same meeting, right? And that's how we're able to separate that out and think of it in terms of a Zoom meeting that's contributing to the content. And then we're sort of just live streaming is kind of like how we think of it. We're live streaming it, but into multiple other Zoom meetings. So the extra complexity comes when you then say, yes, we've got speakers that are in this other Zoom meeting, and now we also have attendees or VIPs that want to be able to speak, and we want to be able to do it. Now it's totally possible, but what you're doing is you're using one meeting that's coming, and that content's coming into the show, and you're then broadcasting it back into the same meeting. So you've got to manage audio in a way. We call that mix minus, where we make sure that we're not sending their same audio back to them again, right? And so you have separate mixes for each one of those meetings so that you can manage that. Go ahead, Muddy.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so one of the ways that I think about it or kind of explain it in language for people who are not familiar with the broadcast is that in Zoom, you need to choose your camera, right? So and you've got options of different cameras. We need a way that we can make sure that have an input that we can select as our camera, and we want to be able to select that same camera in every meeting, essentially. So we need to be able to split that signal. So when Grant's talking about having one speaker meeting, the value of that is we can take the output of that speaker meeting, we can capture that meeting in one way or another, and put that through a system such that we're using the output of that meeting as the input, as the camera into all of these other meetings. So we need some way to be able to pipe one meeting into another meeting. And so at least that's the way that I kind of explain it at the base level. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, so that helps. I think it's just definitely going to take some testing from our side, so we can do that before we obviously go live and just play around with. My biggest concern is the audio. Like, video switching is a lot easier than the audio switching sometimes, and that's my biggest concern. It's like, how do I avoid like the feedback? How do I avoid like speaker not being able to hear client, or you know, vice versa? Especially when you've got multiple rooms.
Yes, and it's very helpful to have particularly an audio operator that has experienced this type of thing before. Now, not necessarily multiple Zoom meetings, but just multiple inputs and outputs, and that they're having to send multiple mix minuses back to different places. And so it's not. It's actually like, you know, you see these big mixing boards, and you see, you know, particularly when they were analog, you know, they just had knobs everywhere, right? And people would walk up and they go, "How do you even know what all that does?" And you're like, "Well, actually, it breaks down very simply, because it all comes down to, if this is it could be a 64 channel desk, it actually all breaks down to this one channel, this one thing does this for one input, and then it's times 64. And so it's not necessarily complex, it's just that it's cascading, you know. And so which is why I love what you're saying about testing. And you could totally test this idea with 2 or 3, you know, sort of meetings, and you don't need a lot of attendees in them. You could simply have 1 or 2 people in each one of those meetings to do a test, because all you're wanting to do is make sure the audio is coming, you know, they can see and hear, and you can hear and see them. And so that's really helpful. And if you have a production team that is somewhat familiar with this type of thinking about multiple inputs and outputs, then yeah, it'll be totally fine. A good audio operator will be able to make that work well.
And just to add to my kind of layman's description, which is helpful for me to think about, the reason Grant is asking about, are they listen only meetings or interaction meetings, has 100% to do, well, has a lot to do with the audio. I mean, it has to do with controlling breakout rooms as well, but it has to do with the audio. If they're listen only, you just need a duplicate feed that you're sending to them. It's a one-way audio feed. You're just sending audio to them, which you can do along with the video, and that's easy. But if you're trying to get audio back from room 2 so that everyone in room 1 and room 2 can hear it, that's where it gets more complex, because you need to set up a separate custom audio feed for each room where you want two-way interaction. So audio is definitely the more challenging from a routing standpoint.
Okay, this was super helpful. Thank you.
That's great. Well, and I love that you're considering audio as well, in that we would always say that audio is really the key, you know, and we know that it doesn't matter how good something looks. If we can't hear it well, then we're switching off. And we've also been on meetings where we have terrible camera angles or things, but we can hear it really well, and we hang around, you know. And so you want to get that right. It also is the most disorientating thing as well, to your point about you get feedback and things, and it can just be it really throws your event when you have bad audio.
Yeah.
So well, this is live streamed to YouTube, our meeting now, and the main reason for doing that is really simple. Going back and getting the recording, right? You can access the recording as soon as we're finished, and so you could send this little conversation to your audio operator or your production team, and they could listen through, and then if they want to join sometime or whatever it is, right? Happy to help all that. Because even though it's a little bit separate from Obvio, it is more and more of what we do. The reason that we have built Obvio the way that we have is for large scale events. It works really well for small events too, but we have built it to manage. I think 39,000 is the most we've had concurrent in one meeting and one event, not a meeting. It was about 100 and something meetings that were going. Someone asked about meeting versus room, and yes, really, the name is interchangeable. I wanted to change when we started calling them rooms early on. I was like, we should change that to meeting. And rooms is just kind of stuck now because we kind of think of areas and rooms, but a room is a Zoom meeting. And so rooms sit within an area. And if you think of an area is can be like a stadium, and the rooms within an area are like sections within the stadium, all different levels, or however you think of it like that. And so there are some extra things that you can do with rules that you can set up to say, I have 6 rooms, but I want, if the person is a VIP, I want them to only go into rooms 1 and 2, or only into room 1. That's all possible. You can also do languages. I don't know if your event is doing multiple languages at all, but okay. I was going to say good. I mean, good from a less complex point of view, but the thing is that it's what we can do with the rules is also say if it's a French-speaking person, then we can send them to the room within the area that's dedicated to French-speaking people, which is really cool, right? Because then when you do breakout rooms, they're all with French-speaking people, things like that. So now you could also do it where, and we've had this before, where you can have a main stage button on the dashboard or general admission button, and you can have a VIP button. And so it doesn't necessarily need to be rules within an area. It could just be 2 separate areas. So from a production point of view, it makes no difference, right? There's Zoom meetings. How the people have gotten into it doesn't really matter to production. So that can be an easy way. It's like a VIP button, and if they have that tag or they're in that group, then you get to see the VIP button, and that's how they join. So just picking up a couple of those other things, but yeah, fire off any more questions and things as you do it. Have you got a bit more lead time before your event?
So the first one is relatively small scale, which is in 3 weeks.
Okay.
And then we build up from there. Then we've got another one in July, and then November, and then the biggest one is December, where we've got a full studio set up exactly like Barry and Blue would use.
Nice.
So that's in December. But then
Great.
that's full day, multiple speakers. So these are the things that I need to start testing and figuring out now with these like little events, so that I'm prepared
So
for
good.
December.
That's so good. Yeah, and the more little events you can do that lead up to that, the better, right? Because you just test out these things. And we've said this before, like you can totally spin up a simple event within a couple of days, where it could just be a Q&A session. You're just like, hey everyone, we're testing some systems, come on for an hour and we're gonna do some Q&A. It's like really simple. You get a couple of hundred people come on, and you can test them across multiple rooms. and you just kind of have backup strategies for if things aren't quite working. If you all you need to do is just make sure you have a team member or a volunteer even that is in each one of those meetings, and if it all goes bad, then they just isolate into their own meetings, right? And so now you've still got someone who's kind of hosting it and can throw around some questions and things like that. But ideally, you're able to test the concept of having multiple meetings and being able to get them to talk to each other and things like that. It's really good. You can never plan enough what you haven't experienced, you know. And so when you actually experience it, it's totally the best way of doing it. So yeah, that's great. I think you're
Oh,
totally asking all the right questions for setting yourself up to win. So yeah, well done.
awesome. Thanks.
Yeah. Oh, I've got a bunch of questions coming in, Heather.
So there was one more from Marilee. She just wanted to know about digital whiteboards for her event. She liked the one that Barry and Blue used at TV6 and just wants to know if there's any suggestions for digital whiteboard specs and things to be aware of, and if she would need a switcher to switch from the video to the whiteboard when it is in use.
Yeah. Blue is not here, as you can see right now, but I believe they've got a Vibe, VIBE, whiteboard. And so if you search for that, Muddy, do you know any other details on that?
Yeah, sure. They do have a Vibe board, and they have tested lots of different boards. So Samsung has one called the Samsung Flip, and there is a Google Jamboard, and Blue has used all of them. And the Vibe board, he said, is far and away the best option of all of them as far as a digital whiteboard goes.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I really appreciate it.
There you go. Yeah. And yes, you get an HDMI output out of those, and you would put that into your switcher, and so then you can cut to it directly. And you've seen what Blue and Barry do with that. Sometimes over the shoulder type view works really well, right? And so you're seeing it as well. But then sometimes cutting to that directly gives some more detail depending on what's being written. I tend to like a blackboard sort of inverted, and so it depends if that works. But I think it works a little bit better on camera to have a black screen with white drawing. And so I mean, all of these digital whiteboards can do that, right? It's just choosing a different color on it. But it tends to work a little bit better with the cameras, I think. But Blue doesn't think that. But this is the Grant's solo show. You can just get what I think about stuff. You can ask Blue next time he's on what he thinks. All right, what's next?
Yes, so Steve asked, he's curious about the choice not to include the Q&A tool built into Zoom. My client is requiring it for their event, and I just like to be able to explain the choice from Obvio's design point of view.
Yeah, so it's not that we've intentionally excluded it. What we've you know, as you know, it's a relatively new feature that they added. It was always in webinar, but they've since in the last couple of months added it into meeting. There's two considerations that we've had. One is that in order for Q&A to work, that it needs a minimum Zoom version. Version control is getting much better in Zoom now. They're kind of automatically forcing upgrades and updates and things, and so that's better because then features all work. But that has been a consideration for us. We have always been a little wary about choosing and then demanding that a particular minimum version is required. We did it when we had multiple breakouts. Was one of the things that we had large breakout allocation. So we could have 100 breakout rooms when most people could not, and it required a minimum version to be able to do 100 breakouts in the meeting, and so we chose to do that. So that's one consideration. That's probably three actually. The second one is that on lots of our events, we're doing multiple meetings, multiple rooms, which means a Q&A button in an individual room is unhelpful for us because it's isolated to that one room. So like what we're doing right here, we're taking questions on a form on our dashboard, and that scales from one to many, lots of many meetings, because everyone's going to that same place. What that does for us as well is it encourages interaction with our dashboard, and it also ties into our gamification system. So now we can give points for people that are asking questions, and they see that and they start to get that engagement, which all leads on to, okay, now they're probably going to stumble across our vendors and us and our sponsors, and right, you can see where all of that leads, accessing resources and things like that. So having another way that encourages people to use the dashboard is really helpful. Third thing, we're working on kind of an optional features list or settings for our meetings, and there's a certain number of things that we think that could be very helpful for people to be able to say, yeah, I want that to be enabled, I don't want this, and there's just a couple of things we've managed pretty well for a couple of years with just kind of threading the needle of the best. Marty's getting excited. Yeah, there's probably a half a dozen settings I think that could be really helpful to push through for people to be able to choose when they're setting up their areas. That would, and Q&A would be one of those, because I can totally acknowledge lots of people are just doing single meeting events, and having Q&A right within Zoom would be helpful. Let me as my final statement in my political answer. It feels like I'm a politician sometimes. My final thing is to say, if you have a need for Q&A on a particular meeting, then if you give us enough lead time and you set up your area in your room and you've got it all there, send an email to us at help@obv.io, and we can manually enable that on that meeting. And so then that may buy you some time. So there's a bit of a combination of, there is some thinking behind it, but it's also a development thing that we need to talk about. So we don't want to just turn it on for everyone, because for lots of our meetings we really don't want it there, and so then we don't want it to default to being on. So there's a few things there. Cool. All right, next question.
So this one's from Muddy. Can I use a trigger from one event to add a tag to an attendee in a different event using Zapier? Use cases using a second event marketplace to sell VIP upgrades.
And what I might offer for context, especially for those that haven't used it before, in Marketplace, you can only actually access the Marketplace if you're not signed in to the event, right? It's designed to be before the event. Once you buy a free ticket and sign into the event, you can't go back to Marketplace to buy the VIP upgrade, because when you go back to Marketplace after you're signed in, it just routes you right to the dashboard.
Yes.
So you can never get back to Marketplace once you've bought a ticket and signed into the event. So I have a client that wants to do VIP upgrades for people who've already bought a free ticket. So the way that we did it is created a second event and set up a Marketplace in the second event, where the only option in the second event is the VIP ticket. So they can go to that. So we can put a button on the dashboard that says buy a VIP upgrade, it routes them to the marketplace for that second event.
Mm.
And so what I want to do, and we can do this manually, it's a small enough event, we can just kind of monitor that second event. And if people buy the upgrade, we come into the first event and add that tag to them. But what I'd really like is to use Zapier. And I know I can have a trigger that says when a new attendee is created in the second event, then take some action. But what I don't know, and of course, I can try it and find out, but I thought I'd ask while I'm here. What I don't know if adding a tag is one of the things that Zapier can do. Adding a tag to a that's really the root of the question. Does the Obvio Zapier integration allow me to add a tag to an attendee?
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yes, it does. And actually, the first thing I was thinking about is you having multiple sources. So having two separate events in the same Zap, like using Obvio twice. But I don't think that's a limitation. I think you can do that okay. You can add the two separate apps basically. So that's fine. But yeah, so then the second part of it is getting the update of a tag to come through. And yes, so on the purchase, see that what would happen is you'd have a new that would be a new attendee, right? Because they haven't been to that event yet. They're signing up. You're getting it as a new attendee. At that point, you're then checking if they exist. I mean, really, it wouldn't matter if they didn't exist. You could push them to update the attendee, and it would just fail if it didn't have it there, and then you could update a tag. So yeah, it's totally doable. It's a shame that it's a workaround for what is quite a reasonable request, and I think it's only a matter of time. That's the type of thing that we want to be able to have with Marketplace, and you hit the nail on the head as far as the way that we've got the process working with Marketplace is that it's another kind of entry point into the dashboard. If they're already signed in, then they don't need to see the Marketplace, unless of course you want to sell an upgrade, which is a really valid and yeah, something that we want to explore. We're always thinking for those listening and thinking about how does Marketplace sort of fit into the structure, because we have other integrations that we work with, like Keep or Infusionsoft or even MailChimp to some degree, and all the other ones that you can do through Zapier. We are really trying to target the Marketplace functionality as just real entry level. You just want to sell tickets. You don't want to have long history of your as a proper customer relationship service management system, because those systems already exist. And so something like Keep totally does what you're talking about, Muddy, right? Like it really does exactly what you're saying. And you could have a button, and I think you've probably seen Blue do events like that with Keep, and have an upgrade button.
I use Kajabi, so I could set up another landing page for it. But the client that I'm working with for this one doesn't have any of that existing infrastructure, and it is a very relatively basic event. So this is trying to help them make it work without them having to buy anything else.
It's a clever workaround, and they're really, with Zapier, I think you should be able to make it work. So yeah, let us know how you go, and I will make sure that sometimes we talk about things that are on the wish list that might be on a wish list in our head but isn't actually on a list yet. So I'll make sure it is. Marketplace upgrades. Cool. What's the next thing?
Steve wants to know if there's any update on marketplace interface that Blue mentioned on the last call.
Yes. There has been, and I haven't been across. There has been a whole bunch of improvements and changes that have happened, and so, but I can't speak to the specifics of it. I know there was a couple of little bugs that were happening there, and we worked on that this week. There was a bit of back and forth about that. So I would do some more testing yourself, play around, and see see if you're experiencing the same things that you may have before. You shouldn't be, is my hope. And let us know if you are seeing anything else that is odd. Remember that Marketplace is still in beta for that reason, so have a play.
All right. And then the next one we have is from John. He said the TV6 replay has been announced. That got me thinking from an Obvio point of view, is there anything special which needs to be considered when hosting an event with a lot of pre-recorded content? Zoom rooms, devices for feeding in the content, plus unknown unknowns versus live events.
Yeah, so you're thinking about how everything to do with having video on demand afterwards, sort of replays of the event, thinking about how that all works with Obvio. Yeah, so you've heard before when we talk about ideally you're recording your event in a separate way that's not relying on the Zoom recordings that the Zoom cloud does. Not to say that it's terribly bad. I think the recordings are quite good that you get off of the Zoom cloud recording, but it won't be as good as if you did it locally within your own system. Oh yeah, Marty, you're saying about the encore event. Is that what you were thinking as well? Encore or just making content available on demand later?
I don't know what I don't know about this, so it could be either they're the same or they're
let me
actually
explain.
very different.
Okay, great. Yeah, let me explain the difference. Yeah, great. Thank you, Marty. First of all, there's making recordings available to people. Let me just speak briefly about that, and then I can talk about an encore and what Blue and Barry have been doing with TVE. Making recordings available, there's a way of doing that simply on your dashboards. Simply in the sense that you would take your recordings and you would edit them. Often you would do at least a top and tail edit, if not, take some time and edit them through to get those sessions right. And then you would host them on a video platform of some description, Vimeo or Wistia or something like that. You could do it on YouTube, but that sort of makes them there's no real way of making YouTube videos secure where they could only be available for your people that have paid. And so you could then take those recordings, say it's in Vimeo, and then you would embed them on the dashboard. And now, post-event, people can come back to the dashboard and see the recordings of your event. It's a really great way. And we've actually done some events where we've sold tickets after the event for people that just wanted to watch the videos afterwards, and so they bought review kind of tickets only. Now that's totally separate to the idea of an encore event, which is to say we're going to take all of the content from the event and then sort of play it back out. And there's multiple ways of doing this. What Blue and Barry are doing is coming on live, sort of doing intros and outros and Q&A live, but the main sessions are the sessions played back from the previous event. And so by calling it an encore event, they're not trying to say this is a whole new event. They're totally acknowledging that this is the event that happened a couple of weeks ago. This is an encore for people that couldn't make it. And so there still is live interaction, but lots of the content delivery is played back. And so from a production point of view, it's no different to playing out a little clip, or whatever in your production setup. That could be software based where you're playing it out of OBS, or it could be hardware based where you're playing it off of HyperDex or QLab systems, or all sorts of different ways of playing back your recordings. But thinking of it in terms of still having live interaction, there's sort of this evergreen is a term that's used for some of this stuff where it's kind of just played out. I'm not a big fan of that. I like the idea of reusing content and all the energy you poured into your event. But if you're wanting people to come at a time and they're doing breakout rooms and things like that, having live introductions and outros and Q&A, I think is really important. So that's
almost a live event with slightly longer recordings rather than. So, is there? You mentioned QDex, HyperDex, things like that. Is there anything from the Obvio point of view that try not to do this? Like I know Blue says, don't load your computer with a lot of things, so don't be bogging it down with playbacks and slideshows while you're doing Zoom.
Yeah, and that still holds true. Blue and I agree on trying to use hardware, like dedicated hardware, to be able to do particular tasks. If you can't do that, or you don't have that, then having as many computers as you can to be able to do the minimum amount that it can do. So an example of that would be to say, I'm going to have one computer that's running OBS and playing video out, and it's going into another one that's running Zoom, and that's how it's being played. That would be my preference, because if OBS dies or the computer dies, you've still got your Zoom machine, all of that's still going. And you could have another, this is best practice for everyone, just hear this, and that is always just have in the back of your mind, what happens if this computer dies that's running your main meeting? What's the experience then? And ideally, you've got another machine that's also connected to that meeting, and you're able to turn that on, and away you go. If that's not the case, you've at least got someone on your team or crew or a volunteer who knows that if it goes dark, that they are on deck, and so now it's now their time to turn on and say, hey, we've lost the feed, we'll get that back in a moment, and they take over, and they know that they're going to now share a story, or they're going to ask some questions, or whatever it is. That's a really good thing to have, because we're dealing with technology and we're in live events. Technology, does wacky things, and live events, there's always stuff that happens at live events, whether it was in person or online. Now, the difference with online, and we all know this, is that we have a very low tolerance for technical problems in online events. And we have a huge tolerance for problems in person events. You think about if you've been at an event, you're there with a couple of hundred people in a room, and the projector dies, or the lights turn off, or the PA turns off, or whatever. You just turn around. You're like, you just deal with it. Oh, I'm sure this will come back in a few minutes, and 10 minutes later, it's all back up and racing again. Think about that in terms of an online event. It's all just gone dark. You're like, what's going on? Is it my computer? It's like, and 10 minutes just feels like 5 hours. And you're probably going to disappear, and it's a very, very different thing. And so as you're planning out your backup strategies and your failovers, you think about it in terms of that, where you can have someone who jumps in and makes things work. We got off track there a little bit, but it's helpful stuff to think about. Is that cool, John? Covers that off a little. Yep, sweet. All right. What's next, Heather?
Okay, Marley says, is there a way I can see or get a report of attendees who downloaded their form report?
The only thing I'm thinking about it, so the answer really is no, but are you using an integration at all, Marley? If you can speak and drive and don't kill anyone or yourself.
Do all the things. Yes, I'm a mom. I do all. No, I don't have any kind of integration. This is just me wanting to be curious with my follow-up email, just to see who actually took that action, to encourage everybody to go back on the dashboard even after the event.
That's really cool. Yeah. So yeah, the answer is no at the moment. And one of the things is that I'm really pushing for us to track all interactions that we have that people have on the dashboard, so that any button that's pressed, we know, that these people press a button. And that's where my head was going. We have a way when there is integrations with Zapier and things like that, where when someone clicks a button, it can push an update to say that they've pushed the button. And so for things like we have that there because of like vendors' resources or things like that. You can say that here's the 5 people that downloaded your resource or something like that. So there's some things in there, but I really want that to be built out some more, so that you can almost do an audit on an individual and say, what was their experience? And so they joined the dashboard, they went into the main stage, then they went to a sponsor's booth and they downloaded this resource and whatever, right? They filled out this form. That's the type of detail that I'd like to get to, as well as sort of aggregate data around that too, that you can say 20 people went to this, did this on this particular day. I think even dashboard, and we're actually starting to track that data now. We just haven't got a mechanism yet to get it out, to sort of export it. So it's all in the pipeline, because one of the things I'm interested in is, when do people go to the dashboard before the event, during the event, and post event? It would be really helpful to know what's the level of engagement even after the event. 2 days, 5 days later, 10 days later, are people still going back and looking at resources or whatever? That's the sort of stuff we want to get to. So I'm sorry I haven't got a better answer for you specifically on that, but it's a great use case of that type of data, and I appreciate you thinking along those lines. That's cool. Cool.
All right. So Jason wants to know about SSO support, like Microsoft 365 and Obvio. Is it coming soon? I have a large event filled with participants from the same organization. SSO connection is a must.
So single sign-on is not something that we have needed to worry about, because of the way that we use the way we have our magic link, like the tokenized link. It kind of is doing the same thing. Now, I get where you're going. What you would like to be able to do, I guess, is to be able to send the same link to everyone, and it auto logs them in based on it being the same link. The difference really with what we have at the moment is that you are sending a unique link to everyone, and it logs them in as who they are. You want to speak to that, Jason?
To register for the event, I want them to be able to just use their credentials and information from their organization, which is already populated, instead of having them have to fill out the form, and then they'll get a personalized link to join. The connectors, and I just need Microsoft 365.
Really
not difficult to do on the back end. It would be for registration. I also kind of want to limit registration to people who are within the organization.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, we don't have that. We don't have that at the moment, but using it as pre-filling registration data, um, that's an interesting one. Um, yeah, I'm making a note of that now. Um, I mean the experience, I guess, is that they'll still log in. They'll have to log into their 365 account through Obvio for it then to be able to populate that data. Just wondering about
Right.
another
It'll
way.
just say continue with Microsoft instead of logging in with your username and password.
Right. Yes.
Anyway, it's not often I
Yeah.
get the CTO directly, so I figured I would ask.
No, you're fine. Yeah, no, yeah. We haven't needed it to this point because of registration as well. Sort of marketplace is a newer thing too, and so I think we've probably been able to avoid it in different ways. But I can totally see a use case for that, particularly within an organization. So just making a note of that too. It's cool. Thank you for asking that. Making me think now. Okay. Next question.
Stephanie wants to know, how do I delete an event? I started, but now I'm changing the format and design. I just want to start over.
So yeah, you can't delete an event still at the moment. What you can do is you can move an event. You can move it from one organization to another. And so if you're not using all three of your organizations, you could set up another organization that's just kind of a sandbox or a testing ground, and then you could move that event that you don't want and move that off to the other organization, and now it's kind of for all intents and purposes dead to you. You could call it my trash organization if you like, and you could put the events in there. Yeah, there's a few reasons why we haven't enabled a delete function from a history point of view and things like that, and some of that is changing, but so we'll see where that goes. But that's the best way to do it at the moment, I think, is to manage it in multiple organizations. Yeah, that archive organization. Yeah, and that's one thing that I've talked about too, Muddy, is just kind of giving everyone an archive organization automatically, and that you can just sort of archive old events and put it into that organization. But yeah, in the meantime, you could do that if you've got the spare organization. Cool. What's next?
Jenny wants to know how she can use two cameras to show details. She's an art quilter, and how does she switch between the two cameras? She is the tech pro.
Nice. That's great, Jenny. Yeah. So my disclaimer in this always is that I say Blue and I say all the time to not tech your own show, but lots of us do have to, right? Like I totally get it. So it depends on the hardware that you have. So when the most entry level is multiple web cameras, right? So webcams and USB cameras, and you can certainly do that. Even in Zoom, you can switch between cameras on that option to be able to switch cameras. You could also do it through something like OBS, so the software that can manage multiple inputs and sort of set up scenes. And with doing it with software like that, you could potentially do side by side, or you can overlay your image and kind of have both cameras going at the same time, to be able to do sort of an overhead camera or something like that over the shoulder. I I really like I really like the view being as close to what your view is as possible, right? Sometimes we get these wacky angles where you kind of feel like you're upside down because it's kind of coming back around. But when it's more closer to what your view is, and it is really helpful for people to grasp what it is that you're doing. And so then you may find that you use that camera angle more so than you do your front on camera, things like that you're switching. So when you go from web cameras, and I mean just like USB cameras and things like that, when you go up from there, you'll then go to more professional type where you're going to HDMI cameras. And when you do that, yeah, go Jenny. You want to tell me what you've got?
Is there a remote that I can use to switch, or is that where I'm going to have to pause myself and go to the computer to do it? If I could do it through a remote, that would just be sweet.
I see, because you need to sort of step away from the computer a bit. Is that right?
Well, the way my
quilting,
setup
yeah.
is, yeah. So picture, I have a table that I'm having built that's big enough that it'll have my machine. I will stand up and sew, and then I will also have the craft table next to it. So I'm not moving out of shot, but I will have a camera directly onto the sewing and another camera directly on my hands overhead. And I have a system that I'm building that will be overhead so that I understand the shots, because I've done it before, but I had a camera crew. And right. So since I'm the new tech crew, which is really questionable, is there a remote that I can use to switch? Otherwise, I'm going to have to like pause, and it just seems like it'd be unprofessional.
Yeah, so there's lots of different ways of doing kind of the switch itself. Let me just check. So the cameras have you already got the cameras, or you're getting cameras? What's happening there?
I'm ordering the video cameras. I have a budget for 2. I really need 3, but I have a budget for 2. And I prefer video cameras as opposed to a mirrorless camera, because I need to be able to zoom in and out remotely, and you can't do that with a standalone camera. So yes, you tell me what I'm
No, that's great. Okay,
do.
awesome. No,
yeah.
that's great, and you know what you're talking about there, and that's absolutely right. You'll also with a video camera too, you'll have less issues with autofocus and things like that. Like it'll just work. And so the controlling of those, I guess you're talking about using a remote to be able to zoom in and out. Is that kind of what you're thinking? Yeah.
Yes. Previously, I only had one camera, but things were they were filmed and then put online. Doing a live event is a whole different animal. And right. So previously with my video camera, I had a remote that if I needed to, zoom a little bit more or something, I could do it, but especially to be able to start and stop. But in a live event, it is completely different. And I'm not quite sure how to handle that situation since I am the tech crew.
Yeah, so let me give you a couple of ideas, right? So firstly, I would say that the type of camera to get, which would be really ideal, and it's not to say that what you're saying, the line you're going down is wrong. The ideal would be pan tilt zoom cameras, right? So
say that again.
Pan tilt zoom cameras, like PTZ cameras, like dome cameras. Have you've seen those? Here's one
I've never seen.
Here's one I prepared earlier.
Oh wow!
Right, and so these types of cameras are able to be remote controlled in their full movement. So there's pan, there's tilt, right, and then of course it zooms. Now the big advantage on this is that you can store presets, and those presets can be recalled sort of instantly, so that you're able to say, here's my wider shot of being able to show. There we go. This is show and tell your pan, tilt, zoom cameras. What sort of money? What sort of money is that, Muddy? Or
yeah, so these are budget cameras
yeah.
that are around $850. They're made in the same factory as the PTZ Optics cameras, but for about half the price.
Right. I'm not sure. You might have been looking more at handy cams or something that you were going to be able to get two of for less than that. Is that what you were thinking, Jenny?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
No, I was buying just below pro grade because I can't afford the pro grade.
Yeah.
I mean, if I have to, I will do it with just one camera and put more money into one camera. I need high quality. In my old camera, it was a 3 CCD. I don't know if that's still applicable. You got to realize I'm old and this is from 20 years ago. So quality, film quality is very important in my craft.
Yeah.
It's very, very important. It's actually paramount. So I had previously, like I said, I had a high end, but I can't hook that up to any type of Zoom call, or it's 20 years old. And it was a professional. So I'm going just below professional grade. I'm spending about $1,200 a camera.
Okay.
So that's my, budget. And this doesn't have to be solved today. If we need to revisit it, later, I'm not to that point yet.
It's a great use case, and I think you've reeled me in, and so Muddy's saying you could get a really good pan, tilt, zoom for that sort of money. So think about it in terms of this, right? The probably the camera you're looking at has all this recording function to be able to record online on itself, and also probably a bunch of audio stuff, built-in microphone, potentially like XLR inputs, all this extra stuff that you don't really need in your application. A pan, tilt, zoom is kind of taking the lens and the sensor of that camera and putting it into a dome and making it that it's remote controllable to be able to move, up and down and in and out and all of that, right? And so so I would, and to your point about 3 CCD and things like that, yes, the technology has advanced a lot, and I think you would find pan, tilt, zoom cameras that could really do exactly what you want it to do, and give you a lot more flexibility than just having a fixed camera. A fixed camera that you might be able to zoom, but then you want to be able to move it or something on a tripod or things like that, right? So I think before you pull the trigger on those cameras, I would try to get a look at some pan, tilt, zooms and see how you feel about that, even if you could test something or get something and return it if you don't like it. But I think you'll find so then what would happen is, from a remote control point of view, you could set up a few presets, and then you could still have control over being able to zoom in and out and things like that, to make finer adjustment.
What about the microphone?
Yes, you should have microphones.
Okay.
So, I would think, because you would be moving around, quite a bit, then I think a headset would be a great way to go. And you know, having something that is a nice headset gives you really good quality audio, and that you can sort of move around and be wireless. So you'd want to do something like the Rode Wireless Go, something like that is a wireless system that you could get a headset for, and then you're able to have some flexibility in moving around. So, yeah, John, good point that it's about having the microphone on you rather than being on the camera or built into the camera. Will give you a better sound. What I'll do, I should be able to find it actually pretty quickly. We've said a couple of times that the way that Blue and I met was through an online group of people, and actually it was someone who we knew of that had been doing podcasts for many years. His name's Alex Lindsay, and he in March of 2020, and the start of the pandemic, was like, hey, let's do some Q&A for people that are doing production stuff, virtual stuff. And with no shadow of a lie, every day since then, every single day, that meeting has continued. So it's, over 1,000 shows of a couple of hours a day talking about all sorts of production and media and all of that sort of stuff. So my point is that I think last week they had a lady on who is a wood turner, and she does, and she's been an instructor for many, many years, but now she does all of it almost exclusively online. And she has a really great setup in her workshop. And so I'll find the video and I'll just post it in the chat here. And if nothing else, it'll be just good inspiration for you as you're thinking about in your application how you different camera angles and microphones. And she goes into detail because it's kind of a bunch of tech people that are asking the questions. So I will just say too that it's every day is general discussion questions for the first hour, and then the second hour is a topic or a guest or whatever. And so the link that I give you, if you just jump through to the second hour, then you'll see. Here it is. I've got it. So. Yeah, so that's the link to it. I think you'll really love it. It'll kind of give you some ideas and things. And so then the last thing I'll just say with remotes, often when we get down to what might be a keystroke, something that might be happening on a computer, or is the computer's controlling something else, when it gets to a keystroke, there's lots of different remotes that you can do that could just trigger that keystroke. There was a time when I lived in LA for a few years, and I was doing a podcast, and I was teching my own show. I was hosting the podcast, and I was also switching the cameras, and I managed to hook up a keyboard, like a piano keyboard foot switch, and the foot switch would switch between the cameras. And so then I was able just to tap with my foot, and that would change cameras, and I just had a monitor in the corner and I could see when it switched, and I would do that. So as long as you didn't get that mixed up with your sewing machine foot switch, then you'll be okay. Anyway, there's lots of ideas with that sort of stuff, but and also the office hours thing that I just sent you is called Office Hours Global. You could ask some of these questions there every day as well. It's at 7 a.m. Pacific is every day when they do the show. But you can also just post questions and then watch the recording afterwards. And it's every day, and they would eat up these questions. They would love it. So there we go. That was a long answer. Hopefully there's some helpful things in there. But all the best. That sounds so exciting. I think it's a great way of using online technology and people. I know we're trying to move on, but the thing that it just reminds me of is what you're talking about doing is better done online than it is in person. How do you get 20 or 50 people all sitting over your shoulder? They can't, right? And so you end up doing something where you might have some cameras and things, or you do some sort of recording. But when people are able to set up their own home and be able to do it, like workshop it in a lab type way of following along in their own environment, and be able to set up big screen TVs to be able to watch you, that suddenly becomes a far better experience than going along to some church hall, right? And trying to do it all together. So yeah, all the best. I think that's a brilliant, brilliant. All power to you. Thanks, Jenny. What's next?
All right, so Sarah, she has a list of questions. So she's just gonna unmute for that.
Sweet. Fire away.
Hi. So I'm my event's next week and I'm the tech and it's my first one. And I believe Blue when he said, oh, you can do this in 6 weeks. So I'm working out my final details.
You believed him. You don't necessarily believe it yourself, but you believed him.
I believed him. I jumped in and I went, what am I doing?
Nice.
12 weeks would have been better. I think if you already know what you're doing, yes, you can, but that wasn't my case. All right. So I'm in Obvio. If stuff is in the tutorials, just tell me it's in the tutorials. I'll go back and look. I went through them in the beginning, but need to revisit. So I see there's a place to put a link in the agenda. What do people usually use that link for?
Yes. Let me have a quick look here. It can be used as to be honest, it's not used a lot. So it can be used for linking off to something that's saying, in this session, we want you to do this, or in this ad break, go off and go to this site and sign up for this, or whatever. So, so rarely is that used or needed, but it was a feature that we needed for one particular event where they wanted to be able to add a link to the title. I'm just testing.
Gotcha. Okay, Muddy. Yeah, I'm not. I'd like to do that calendar thing, but I don't know how.
Yeah. Okay. Muddy. Yeah. Using. Yeah. That's cool. Using links in there. That's one way of doing it.
Good. I just to me it seemed like maybe it was just part of like the features that go with setting things up, but I thought I wanted to know.
No, it's a good question. Mm-hmm.
So somewhere, and I think it was here, it was mentioned that someone, maybe Stu, sends people elsewhere instead of like the offline event page goes someplace else, and I couldn't remember where.
Okay, so there is offline. There is area offline, right? When someone, and you're not necessarily asking about this, just when we talk about offline, just so we're on the same page.
Sure, thank you.
When someone clicks a link to go into Zoom, if it's offline, then there's an offline page that says, the meeting is offline, and you can write whatever you want there. And that's when you might say, we're offline right now, come back at 9 a.m. That's when we open the doors, right? So that's the area offline page. An event offline is where you can make a you can kind of close the whole dashboard and everything and just have a page that says the event's now done.
Okay.
And that can be customized, or it can be a total redirect. And so you can say anyone who tries to go to your dashboard after your event, it redirects them off to your sign up page for your next event or whatever you want to do. Lots of people we're finding are still just keeping the dashboard open and putting some content on the dashboard that says, thanks for a great event, whatever. Here's the details of the next one, and yet here's all the resources and everything are still available here for you to come back.
Gotcha.
From an Obvio point of view, we don't have an expiry on dashboards. So there's your event start time and end time, which is all about using Zoom. The dashboard itself is available from the moment you send links to people, which could be a month before your event starts. They could have access to it. And while you're still paying your subscription to Obvio is how long that dashboard will continue to be available. And so it can be a place where people can go back and get resources and things like that.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. There was a question in there. It was an option. Do you want people to be able to use multiple devices? Is there best practices or a recommendation for that?
Yeah, so generally we default it to not allow multiple devices, and so you would need to check it to allow multiple devices. And all that means is that if someone shares their email, their link, they can have the dashboard open on as many machines as they like, right? And they could share it with all their friends, and all their friends could go to the dashboard. That's possible. But the default is that it will only allow them to join Zoom once. And so you can't be joined to it multiple times. Now, we have the option there because sometimes, depending on your event, you may want to allow people to be able to join twice. And Jenny, it could be an example for you. It could be that some people are saying, do you know what? I'd love to be able to join twice because I would join on my phone as well as on my computer so that I can show with my phone, I can show the work that I'm doing and I can ask questions and things like that through my phone while I still have it on my TV or my big computer. And so there are certain times where allowing multiple devices works. But let me just say that on all of our huge events, we don't allow multiple devices.
I saw it wasn't the default was not, so I thought I need to understand what's happening. Okay,
Yep.
great. So
Great
I also
question.
saw. Okay, thank you for the clear. Wait, so Zoom room. So when I create a room, because I know I have a limit of rooms. When I create a room, the first one I create, then that's main stage, right? Or
Can be,
whatever I
yep.
call it.
Sure.
Okay. And then if I call it something, like I put it in that box, is that how it appears on the dashboard with that term? Okay. All right.
No, and it says their internal description, and
Perfect.
and it just means that it's whatever is helpful for you. And same goes with the area name. You can call that whatever you want, because you create a button on the dashboard that links to that area. The button can be named whatever it wants, and you can link that to whatever area, and that could be called whatever you want as well.
So by area, do you mean room, meeting, area are all the same, or is area something different?
Yeah. So there's areas and then there's rooms, and rooms sit within areas. When you create an area, so a Zoom area, when you create it, it automatically creates one Zoom room within the area. And for most people, that's all you need. You just need that one room within the area. I think you were on earlier when we were talking about like the 6,000 people event. we need lots of rooms within that one area to be able to host all the people, to be able to get them all into a meeting. So that's when it's
Because of
multiple,
Zoom's limitations.
because of Zoom's
Okay.
a
All right.
thousand
Gotcha.
people limitation. Yeah.
Okay. And then is the practice when you have, like I have a VIP welcome session and then the Q&A session. So is the practice that that is a room and then I close it down after those sessions? Or is the practice that I just use the same room and then if somebody happens to show up early, they just don't get admission into that room? What is the best way to set that up?
Tell me a little bit more about your event. How are you planning those sessions and things? How does that work?
So right now it's like 24 people, maybe I'll have 35, so it's not big. I'm just very grateful for what I have.
It's not small.
And then the welcome session, so it'll start 11 a.m. The welcome session would be an hour before that with a 15-minute break in between before everything starts. And the Q&A session for the VIPs would work the same way on the second day.
Okay, Q&A session for VIPs at
Yes.
what time? When does that work?
Like 9:30, 9:15.
Before
And then yes.
before the main thing starts. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So it does work best for a VIP session like that to have a dedicated area and room, so that you can just shut it down, you can just close it, and then ideally, because I'm guessing it gets pretty close to the start of the main room, ideally you've got your main room going as well. And those VIP, there might be a few general admission people that have joined, and then your VIPs finish, and then they all come in, and it actually is quite a seamless way of doing it.
Yeah, I almost just did it, and I thought I better check.
Yeah, no,
that makes perfect sense to me.
That's really cool. And let me just say too, and of course you're planning in your head about the timings of things, and I just encourage you that that we are not limited by time and space when we're doing these events, and to give yourself freedom to flow with it, because you can get yourself into a frazzle when you're watching the clock so much.
Mm-hmm.
And so my encouragement to you is that you connect with your audience, not your agenda, right? Not your schedule, but you are connecting with them, and you're on a journey with them, and then it will flow. And of course you have to know where you're going, but I'm seeing that more and more. And were you able to come to TVE? Have you seen? Did you Blue and Barry's
I've
event?
seen a couple TVEs, and I've
Right.
done like one-day trainings virtually. So for my process is to be really tight, well rehearsed, know exactly what I'm doing, so that I can move based on the audience's needs.
That's great. Yeah, and please don't take any of my comments like I'm judging, because I'm basing it just on what you're saying, and you're
No, not at all.
all of you are like highly experienced at what you do, and perhaps it's just in a new environment that you're thinking about. But it's in that new environment that I think that we can maximize on the differences that we have that we're doing online, because we're not worried about the lunch is about to be delivered, or whatever it is. Like, people are more flexible, and there's those opportunities that you get. There's those special moments that happen when we're not restricted by time. To your point though, exactly right. You want to know your content really well, so that then you're able to have that flexibility and to be able to flow with the people as they're going, and make it feel like that. And so not advertising agendas and things, I think is really good. Not having clear schedules, not, all of that stuff, so that it's just people know that, hey, we want you to clear this time and go on this journey together. Not be trying to come in and out, or or think that you know when something's going to start or doesn't, that sort of stuff.
Yes, I have stolen Blue's comments that Stu uses where, we're going to do this from this point amount of time and you're going to have like awesomeness. And then we're going to start at this point in time and you're going to have awesomeness, more awesomeness. So I'm like, I love that.
So good.
This is what you're going to get at the end and the process is going to be great. And, I'm going to keep you on your toes and surprise you the whole way through.
Love it.
Which gives
So
me enormous flexibility.
Yeah. Yeah. So good.
Yeah. Awesome. So I'm excited about that. Okay. So when I click on the emojis, it says show emojis. I get a blank screen. Do I need to do something? Is that correct? Or it's a black screen, not a blank screen?
So are you intending to use emojis in sort of your production setup? What are you thinking there?
I'm not sure. I just thought like, oh, well, let me see this and then I can decide based on how this works. So if that's something to just let go, no problem.
Well, let me say, with the questions you're asking, I feel like it's a massive strength of yours that you are exploring all of the areas and going, what does this do and what am I missing out on? And I applaud that.
Well, thank you. That's exactly what's in my head.
So the weakness of that is you overwhelming yourself with a whole bunch of stuff that just may not be necessary for this event, right? And getting distracted by other things and not focusing on just what's required for this one, right?
Yeah. So the part I don't know, I don't feel overwhelmed, but the part I don't know is this thing a requirement or is it not a requirement? So that's kind of what I'm sorting through at this point. Like, what is there? How does it work? Is it going to surprise me later if I don't make a decision about it?
That's great. So good.
So that's a cool thing I don't have to deal with.
Well, so let me just explain what it is, and for people watching as well. So the emojis, you may have seen it on TVE or other events that we have, where often in the set there's a screen or a wall that has emojis flying up over it.
Yeah.
In order to do that, there's buttons on the dashboard, and attendees are clicking those buttons, and then we have a screen that you can open on your within the admin of Obvio, and that screen is then used in multiple ways. You could upload a background and then put it on a TV in the set. And to answer your question about it being a blank page, there's two things going on there. One is that the opacity could be set, and so it was fully set.
It didn't change it.
Okay, but then you would also need to be clicking the button on the dashboard as an attendee
gotcha.
to be able to get them going up.
Gotcha, I see.
So
yeah, and so then based on your comments, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that if you're not intending to have sort of within your set a screen, or if that doesn't kind of fit necessarily with what you're doing with this one, then it's probably some complexity that you don't need to have on this one.
Yeah, that sounds like it. And I have those paddle things, so we'll just use those and that'll be fine.
Yeah.
And then based on your comments, I would guess that this whole thing about the background image and the waterfall enabled is a similar concept, and I don't need that either.
Yeah, well, and there's some things that generally we would say that if it works big, it works small. But I guess there is a limit to that, and that and emojis is a good example. I think that the paddles is a way better thing for a smaller group. But if you had 2,000 people, well, then the emojis works really well, to be able to gauge where people are at and their emotions and things like that, right?
Gotcha.
Whereas with 30 people, I think you're gonna be able to see. You can set up gallery view to be able to have 49 people on your page, right? So you're gonna be able to see everyone, and so the paddles is a great example of that. Image waterfall, things like that. once again, works really well with large numbers. But for the smaller numbers, well, you could think about other ways of them being able to share images and things. And you could set up things like any number of Facebook group, a WhatsApp group, a Telegram group, whatever, right? Which I'd encourage anyway, because having multiple forms of communication to your attendees is really helpful. And so if something falls over, all of these internet services can stop working, right? Like it's possible. If something goes down, having something other than email can be really helpful to be able to get to them. You'd likely send an email, but to be able to jump on a Telegram channel or into a WhatsApp group or something is super helpful, and you get a bit of interaction that happens outside of the event as well. Keeps it all going.
Perfect. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And then I saw that there's an ability to create Zoom rooms inside Obvio. Is that like is that a preset? Like if I know how many people are coming and I want like 10 rooms, then it presets, and is that a function? I do that instead of what I would normally do with inside a Zoom room to create breakout rooms.
Okay. Yeah. So I was talking before about how someone was saying about meetings versus rooms. And this is a big reason why I wanted to not use the term rooms, because what I'm talking about is meeting, and what you're talking about is breakout rooms within a Zoom meeting, right? And we use them all the time. We use breakout rooms. What we're talking about with rooms is rooms within areas. And so now
Gotcha.
in this way, let's substitute the term room with meeting. And now it's starting to make more sense. Now we're saying we want multiple meetings within an area, and within each one of those meetings, we can do breakout rooms.
Gotcha. And so then to do that, I would use the breakout room in Zoom like normal.
Yeah, it's exactly the same way. When you start the room, when you start the meeting, the room, you'll come in as host, and then as host, you'll have all of those functionality that you're used to.
Perfect.
And so, and then of course, if you create co-hosts as well with a team, they'll also all see the breakout room buttons and things like that too. And
perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then how does the leaderboard search function work? Like I saw it just said search, and then the number 200 is there, and I didn't understand how I might use that.
Yeah, so that's for are you saying within as an attendee being able to see it, or
no, as a me?
Okay, so what that is with a large event with more than 200 people, and you're wanting to find a particular person and what their score is.
Gotcha.
So it's just like it's just a lookup tool to be able to find different people that's more than 200. And it had
it's just find a member find an attendee on the leaderboard.
Yep.
Gotcha.
These are great questions.
This note, maybe I didn't write down enough words. So I have other things for actions. What kind of other things can be for actions? But I don't remember where actions was. Was it around the points? Maybe
it's probably about points. Yeah.
And so what other things can I give points to?
So this is a good example of something in the tutorial when Blue goes through points. Are you thinking of using points? Is that something like you certainly can on this event? Is that what you're planning? You're planning to run?
So I'm kind of exploring, like what is it? How might it work? Would it be interesting? So I'm kind of information gathering before I decide yet.
Fair enough. It's the type of thing that with the right amount of time, just planning it out before, that it will kind of run itself through the event. And so there is something there, and even with a smaller group of people, there is still the competitive edge and people seeing them, their name on the leaderboard and finding all the buttons that they need to find to be able to get points. It's essentially points for going to the dashboard. Sort of the ones that are listed there. There's a few there, but then you can create an action that then could be assigned to a particular button, as an example, and so or a form. Like there's a few things, different actions that can be taken that you can set up, and really, the creating an action is really about awarding points, so that for one button it could be a very obvious button and you're giving 5 points, but there is a button that's kind of hidden away on the speaker page or something like that, and you're going to give 500 points for that one. And so that requires a unique action to where you're that action is awarding the amount of points for that particular action. And so that's how,
I'm in social services. And so people, like, they're not going to get money. They work for an agency, but they all like it's a very pat on the head recognition based audience. So I'm thinking I want them to understand that if they go into the high ticket offer, like, there's lots of pats on the head, they get lots of credit for things. And because they're typically employees and someone else is footing the bill, I was thinking that if I could build this points kind of thing, then I can report out to someone else who's paying the bill their participation. And I want to frame it in a context of, you're going to get credit when you do well in this program. Your superiors are going to know how great you are and how much you now know. And so I was thinking about how to connect points to that, and then begin that training mindset in just this event. If that makes
really
sense.
Cool. Yep. It's really cool. And I think the points could play a part in that. My thinking is more along the lines of things like forms, where you're, think of like surveys or whatever, but the idea of getting people to fill in forms throughout the event is tangible data that you and or them have access to, right? And so what Marley was asking about before was she was saying when people download their form report, she was asking if you could know who has downloaded their form report, but there is functions there to be able to get a report of all the forms that they've filled out, and they can download that themselves. And so the advantage of that is to say throughout the event, it's kind of like their workbook in a sense, that you're asking a few questions, they're filling in that data, and then they're saying at the end of the event, actually, I'd really like to be able to take that data with me. And that's what that form report is. But all of that data now is yours as well, right? And you're now able to use that to be able to say, this is the journey this person went on, or, this is the type of whatever the progress is that you're tracking, and to be able to say, this is what happened. At the end of each session, we did this, and we tracked a particular thing, and now at the end of the event, we've made progress. And so if you were to buy the high ticket offer,
you make more.
The progress would be more. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I can see that would be very helpful too, because there's not these they provide services to people with disabilities. They work in silos. They don't have a lot of interaction with each other. They have a lot of interaction with regulators and overseers, but they don't have with each other. And so they feel like their problems are their own, and they're just failing. So it sounds like this would be very helpful to show aggregately, like you're not failing. Everyone in the industry is having the exact same problems, which
Right.
I always say is a good thing, because then one solution is going to fix it.
Right. That's great. Well, and that's where I think I'm not a big fan of polling, but polling used for that application, I think, can work really well, right? Where I'm looking at these multiple choice options, and I thought I was the only one, but yet it's a multiple choice option.
Yes.
And that means that, wow, okay, yeah, and I do want to say that. And then you're able to say, yeah, 95% of you came back and said that you struggle with this particular thing, and you thought you were the only one. That sort of stuff is it's super powerful when you can start using the data like that back onto it.
Yeah,
The
great
chat
idea. I do that
Sorry.
in my trainings, but I didn't even think about it for this, so I appreciate that. You were
Well,
going to say something else?
I was just going to say chat. Like I'm constantly thinking about what advantages do we have, because I think there are quite a lot advantages to us doing things online and people doing it through interacting through the machine. And one of those things I think is chat. In that you're getting insight into what people are thinking at the time, and everyone's kind of getting that insight. And so it's such a simple tool, but harnessed well can be really powerful, because you can get a snapshot of what people are thinking within a very short space of time. It's very different to asking people, what do you think about this? And you get someone who just wants to speak, and they rabbit on for 5 minutes and they don't get to the point. Whereas when you say to people, here's a specific question and write the answer in the chat, now within a very short space of time, and with 30 people, this can work really well, is that bang, you've got that answer, and they all see the answers, and it's highly interactive. But you wouldn't think that. It's all about how you harness that tool. When you go, yes, I've seen chat within Zoom, people are using it now, big deal. Like, what are you talking about? People can type. But when you set it up in a way that in a very quick moment, we can get a, not just a snapshot, but we can get instant insight into what people are thinking now. Tell me what you're thinking now. Bang, do that. And it's just harnessing that. It's just such a simple thing, but it can be really powerful.
I agree. I love that. And Katie Horner says that she takes chat scripts, puts them into the chat AI thing, and asks for like the top 5 ideas or comments or whatever, which I think is brilliant too. So I started out doing trainings that I was hired by other entities. And so I didn't have access to the videos, but I started, just downloading the chats at the end. So to put like all of those together and run that kind of thing is, I think would be very powerful as well.
Super powerful. Yeah. And thinking about it, I use ChatGPT all the time because I'm lots of coding and stuff like that. It's amazing for. But more and more, I'm using it for analysis, and to be able to plug in a bunch of data like that, and then think about the types of questions you're asking. What are some key themes, that sort of stuff, and to be able to do that even in a break, and be able to share that back when people come, like that sort of stuff is really dynamic, and it becomes a unique experience that's happening. It's unfolding in front of them. The last thing people want is to feel like, here we're going through this, the dot points on a PowerPoint. It's just like bang, 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 great. And here's another slide on another PowerPoint. Awesome. But when it feels like they're manipulating it, like they're helping to unfold it and stuff, I think. And with 30 people, you can totally have a lot of interaction once again, you couldn't do it, I don't think, even with 30 people in the room in the same way that you could do in the way that we're doing this.
It is different. It is. Now, the thing I like about the room is if you have a quiet group, you can manipulate that by just where you stand and,
Sure.
different things energetically. But if you have a group that's willing to talk, then I agree with you. It does. It's just, it would be like in another environment. In person, you would be telling them like, one at a time, or,
Yeah.
we have to chill out a little bit, like, give me a minute. So I love the rapid fire, and it feeds well for my ADD. So like I'm in heaven. And when I do trainings, because I give the slides, I am like forced to do a lot of PowerPoint, I feel like, because that's their takeaways, right? So
There's a
that's
lot
their
of
study
content.
guide later.
Mhm.
So when they reference, they've got the content. So I'm excited about this environment because I can have, the slides aren't the foundation, they're the, like window dressing around the conversation.
Yeah.
So and then I did make like a workbook, so they have a place to,
great.
have triggers and that kind of thing. But so I'm excited about the change, and I think it'll be like the energy, my energy is just completely shifted in thinking about what I can do in service to these folks that I could not do in a different setting, even online.
Super cool.
For me.
Super cool. Yeah. And I think that getting people talking is a real art to, and I'm sure you've got a bunch of experience of doing that, the icebreakers and all that sort of stuff. But icebreakers online, I think you have to get really creative. And I was talking the other week about just simple things about getting people to go and get something, go outside, find something in the garden and bring it back and talk about it. And all it is being able to get opening the microphone, speaking about something, and it can be as mundane as a bit of bark or a flower or whatever it is. But it gets that ball rolling, and now people also connect with each other because they know something about that person. That's the person that found the spider in the tree. Okay, I know that person. Right?
Yeah.
Or I said, you do a hat competition, the person with the funniest hat or whatever, and they go off because they're likely at home and they got to come back with something and whatever, and someone comes back with a pot on their head, and like right. These are just real simple ideas, but and Muddy's saying engagement is a skill, and I certainly don't want to assume that you don't know any of this stuff. It's just a conversation about the encouraging.
Oh, absolutely. And
encouraging
great
us
idea. When my daughter went to
do
college, they were in a circle and they said, like, say something about yourself. And she said, I like Kit Kats. And like for 4 years, that's how she was referenced. So like what you're saying is directly on point. And I love that idea of, my folks are probably going to be in their office, but that doesn't mean they can't pick up something.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and why is it important? What if you didn't have it anymore? Like, where'd it come from? Those kinds of things. So those are really meaningful methods. And you're right. The purpose is, 1, to get them talking, and 2, it helps others identify them.
Right. Yeah. Find the most unusual mug in the kitchen. Like, like go and get paper from the photocopier. It's like it's kind of these fun stuff about the things that they're
exactly. I love it. Well, thank you so much. And that's the end of my questions for now. And I appreciate your generosity and sharing your answers.
Well, I think you get the prize for the most amount of questions. Rapid fire questions. Well done. No, that's great. It's really good. And all the best. I think you're setting it up to win. That's really amazing.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah. I'm sure.
1 week left.
Yeah, that's great. What else? Have we got anything left, Heather?
No, that was it.
That was it. Cool. Look, everyone
Yep.
hung around.
Yeah. Good morning.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Hello.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah. How is everyone?
Doing
Okay.
very well.
Okay. Very good. I did post a question, so I'm looking for a list of just a starter list of how to get started in terms of equipment. Yes, I could go on and do all of the search all over the place, but I don't want to do that. I just want to be able to know what if there is a list, just a starter kit. I'm not intending to be the tech person. I have a very base level of information about, and knowledge about the tech, but that's not where I want to be. I want to be able to hire or bring about a tech support team, because then when I'm doing what I'm doing, I'm not paying attention to all of that. My approach is always to be engaged with people. So that's what I'm looking for. Starter list. Is there one available?
No, there's not a there's not a list. There's not a list. What I was thinking of is, yeah, I thought that too, Muddy. That Blue did a session at TVE where he went through kind of three or four different levels of the production.
Mm-hmm.
I love what you're saying about having people come and do it for you, and I totally agree. It means that you can just focus on the content and the community, and you're not worried about tech, and that's totally the direction to go. One of the things I would just consider is that what is the base level quality that you would want for your home setup, regardless of whether you're doing a show or not, or an event. And I would think there's a few more tweaks that I need to do to this setup, but you would hear that my sound is good, and that you can see me, and that there is a level of quality to the image that I benefit from in all of the meetings that I do. I would say that how we technically present in meetings now, online meetings, is the equivalent to how you dress. And we would often have no problem spending a decent amount on a new dress or suit or whatever to impress, going to a meeting. I think we should consider that same type of thing when we're planning out our tech setup at home. So I know you're asking about what is the basic for just getting going.
Well, right.
And then-
Okay. And even more, I'm sorry to cut you off, but even more
you go.
specifically on products. So I'm aware that audio is key, but going through, a number of different kind of audio products, I can do that, but I don't want to do that. That's why I'm here. So when I'm looking at starter, then that's what I'm looking at, a starter list. Yes, I have maybe some, personal kind of equipment, but I know that that's not enough for a base level. The other thing is that it will help me to bring on the right people to assist me for the future.
You're totally asking all the right questions. It's great. What sort of budget do you think that you could commit to it?
Don't know.
Initially. Yeah, you do. You've got to know if I said can you spend $3,000 or can you spend $300?
I'm willing to spend $1,000.
Okay. All right, that's good. See, you did have a number. So that's good.
No. You kind of pushed me into that. That wasn't my intent.
The good thing is I don't stand to make any of that money. So that's what's good. You can trust me. I'm not trying to sell you something. So Sarah, did you come back on just to laugh? Is that what happened then? Nice. All right. So $1,000, that's good. So what you can do, and I'd be interested if Muddy's still. So Muddy's posted, and this is totally right, and it's an order of priority. I think about this too, is that you want to make sure you've got good bandwidth first, right? So before anything, you need to have good internet. It doesn't matter how great your setup is. If your internet's crap, then you're not gonna have good meetings and nothing's gonna work. So you want to make sure that you're connected to a cable connection, not using Wi-Fi, but connected to your router. And so often all that requires is getting a long cable, and it might be a really long cable, but that's fine. You can run it through your house to be able to get it to where you need it to go. And then have that sorted. The next thing is audio, and as you said, so now you want to look at a microphone, and a real common one is the Shure. I'm trying to think of the SM7B. Is that the USB version? There's another one, I think. MV7. Thank you.
MV7. Yep.
Thank you, dude. That's right.
MP7.
MV7. It's a Shure MV7. That's a USB, and you'd want to get an arm for that, like some sort of microphone stand, or like someone's right. Got an arm that can position it where you want it to go. And then the next thing we think about actually is lighting, I say. And so you can have an amazing camera with poor lighting and it looks terrible. You can also have an average kind of camera with great lighting and it looks good, right? And so that's why the next most important thing is lighting. And there's lots of different options there, and I know you don't want options, you just want the list.
Yes. However, I do have lighting. I did purchase lighting.
Okay, good.
For this particular purpose, or I was gifted lighting.
Well, I want to know your friends. That sounds great.
Okay.
So yeah, there we go. Yeah, I think Muddy's helped me out. So if you got lighting, then that's great. So then the next thing is the camera, and I think you can do a lot worse than this one. This is the Insta360 Link, and it's a little camera that'll sit on your computer, on your monitor, and it will move around. It tracks you as well, and it's great. So you could go down that line. So that was what Insta360 is the brand, and Link is the model of the camera.
Okay.
Now that's just a web camera, right? So it doesn't it does kind of limit you into just connecting one camera into the computer, and that's it, and it doesn't sort of go down the line of more professional cameras with multiple angles and things like that. But just for looking good as a basic setup, that's a great camera. That would work really well, particularly with the good lighting. So that's lighting, camera, and then environment. So I would think about, if you've already got lighting, think about the type of environment that you're in. And so the room that you're in, what that is showing. Ideally it's not too busy, the environment that you're in. and that it's quiet and that it doesn't have people walking in the background and things like that. So you actually have consideration about the space that you're in. And so that might mean that you may spend some money on some set pieces, or some, thinking about what you have in that background and what that says about you. Well, now I think you're in a pretty good spot. Then you'd have good audio, you've got good lighting, you've got a good camera. I don't know about your computer. I'm assuming that the computer's okay. It's working okay on this call.
I've got two, and they're in the boost. They're in the boost mode. So I'm cleaning out some things so I can use it. So I've got two computers. I've got plenty of television screens because I don't watch TV anyway that much. So
Right.
and I also have a place to do a setup. But so what we're discussing right now helps, and I know that I'm not the only person who has ever asked this question or needed this, in terms of being a starter, because as a professional, like many of us, we've got a lot of expertise in what we do or what we're going to do. But when it comes down to the tech, in the past, I've worked with people who are tech specialists. However, it's been in a different environment. So this helps me to be familiar, get what I need to have here, and also talk with someone or people who I want to engage to be able to help me with the setup. I don't want to bring somebody on and they don't know a whole lot more than I know. And so therefore we don't have a successful experience together.
It's so true.
And I also see a couple of things in the chat, Muddy, and I think somebody else, Steve, earlier on gave me a couple of recommendations about some previous videos. So Grant, this has been helpful. I won't take up a whole lot more time because I have what I need, but I'll be back.
I'm glad. No, that's great. And it's good. It's good questions, and it makes us think about what do we need to know, and what do we need to just be able to have other people do. And I think you're finding that really good balance, where there is a bit of upskilling that we need to do to just be able to do the basics, and then we can get other people in to handle that. And there's expertise out there of people that know what they're doing. There is also advantage in just having someone else who's overseeing something and looking after it, and they don't necessarily need to be an expert in that field, but they are another person who's worrying about that aspect of what you're doing, and there's a lot of benefit in that too. So but yeah, I think you're asking all the right questions. That's the hardest part, right? It's getting the questions right.
Thank you. And also I would have to say that listening to Sarah go through her questions about her event that's coming up. I think last week I was on another call where another person was getting ready for their events. They had very specific questions that were, technical but useful to be able to see, okay, if I'm the creator and I'm the organizer and I'm the producer of this whole thing, then my role is to know enough of what has to be available to be able to help people to, get it done. That's not just the attendees, but also anybody who is working to support this. So I don't have an event already set up yet, but I know what I'm missing. So thank y'all.
I don't doubt it at all, Lane. I don't. That's great. Thank you. Thank you for the questions. All right. We don't normally go the full 2 hours in the morning sessions, so that's impressive. You're just warming up now. You're just trying to get me to stay up all night. Jenny. Nice. But it does look like the questions have come to a halt. Has anyone else got any other questions, comments, observations? Can tell me that it was better that Blue wasn't here. You could tell me that. you got to hear what I thought more. No, I've missed Blue. It'll be good. Hopefully he's back. Solo show. Yeah, it'll be good if he's back next week. Save the questions for next week. So what Blue, yeah, you could ask the same questions and then Blue will give you opposite answers. So be like, the worst thing that you could buy, Jenny, is some PTZ cameras. That's the worst thing that you could get. That's what Blue will say.
That's what he and Barry did in the the debrief.
Right. The opposites of everything.
They just argue back and forth. No, I think it's this. No, I think you're wrong. I think it's this.
Yeah.
I'm just glad that I hadn't bought the cameras yet, because I was actually getting ready to pull the trigger today. So I am very pleased. I was sleeping in this morning and forgot it was an 8 a.m. and got the ping on the phone. So I'm very, very glad you just saved me a lot of money.
Well, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
so
I think
I'm looking at the cameras and they do look a little pricier. So you're going to run over my budget, buddy.
Well, yeah, I wonder which one was you can ask Muddy, the one that he was saying, because that was a bit cheaper. There's a few.
For me, it's all about lens quality and quality of being able to turn that into a video that'll stay online. For me, that is just paramount.
Totally agree. Well, and they've gotten better and better. I mean, Blue, I know that Blue wouldn't say to not do PTZ because he has them in his studio, but he has like Sony broadcast PTZs that you can actually interchange the lens on it and everything. It's quite a beast. But yeah, I think that you would find. Where are you? Where are you situated?
I'm north of Indianapolis. I'm in Indiana. Okay. And so yeah. And I'm hoping my internet will be good enough. But I'm just going to do a beta run with I called some people and we're just going to do a beta run in mid-June. I'm not as brave as Sarah. I have great admiration for you, girl. You go. So I'm going to wait and do my event in August, maybe September. But I'm going to do a couple of beta runs to just make sure it's all. I'm worried about, how you talk about the rooms, and I can save this because we're running over. I can save this for next week. But what I keep getting concerned about, and you answered it a little bit when you said be able to have dual connections and they can use their phone, because if they're sewing along with me or they're working right along with me, I'm not quite sure yet how to handle that at a live event. I know how I'd handle it in classroom because I'm right there. Mm-hmm. But I want to have a couple of beta events to kind of be able to sort through that. But you answered it beautifully with saying they can use their camera to be able to show where they're having a problem or what they're doing, and then have their computer and their big screen TV for being able to watch. But I've got some concerns, but I think some beta events will help me sort through them.
Yeah, I think they always will. Those testing events and trying to make them as true to the reality of what you need to do as possible. And so if it's a smaller project, but it is a complete project, and so that you can sort of go through all of the steps, and then do the interaction and things. I think that'll be really helpful.
that's where I'm sorting out I'm going to be posting a lot on Facebook with the high ticket offer and that. I'm still sorting a lot of that out. And I think it's just going to be a matter of just get in there and do it.
It totally
and
is.
flub your way through it. Just wing it. And I'm pretty good at winging it. And so just, ride by the seat of my pants and have some kind of plan.
But I would say that that tech check would be a really helpful thing to do for your events. So I think you've probably heard us talk about tech check a lot. And initially, really what we were doing was making sure that people's microphone and camera was working, right? And so that we're confident then that when they go into their breakout rooms, that it's going to work. When you don't do that, or you haven't heard from people, the chances are they go into a breakout room, their microphone's not working because they hadn't tested it. And now half, or if not all, the breakout room session is hijacked because someone's tech wasn't working. Now, even more so on your event, what you want to be doing is setting a level of expectation for people that they can't just throw a laptop on their sewing table and think that it's all going to be okay. That they actually need to consider what is the best way to interact with this event, and to be thinking it through and to be testing it. So before you even start anything, you're saying we're going to dedicate some time to just getting people working. And here's a few tips. This is what we want to do. We want to be able to see this. You might need to get, if you need to get help, to get a TV to, connect a laptop to a TV so that you can make it nice and big. You might need to roll a TV into your craft room or whatever it is, right? That those sorts of things will make or break your event. Like the technology aspect of it. And
maybe,
sorry,
I'm so maybe having kind of like the Tony Robbins event, how they have a pre-event. Maybe I need to have not just a pre-call. Maybe I need to have a small pre-event to make sure they're set up. Would that maybe
100%
and something like that?
Yeah, and think outside of the box as well, where it's like, okay, we've got this event coming up, but what we're going to do is 2 days before, we're going to do an hour session of just working on our tech. And then the next day, we might even check in again. And so because in that first tech check session, you might be saying, oh, on your particular setup, have you got another TV? Oh, yeah, I do. It'll take me some time to get. Okay, get that sorted out in the next 24 hours. We're going to come back and we're going to get that right and make sure it's all working well, so that then when it comes to our, hands-on time, that we know it's going to work well, So you can't waste time in doing appropriate setup for people. It'll be really good. And then I think their experience will be such a quality experience for you. I wonder for you as well, there could be an element of you doing some pre-record elements potentially, or something where you're able to go, okay, now here's a pre-recorded video that goes for 5 minutes of me showing how you set up this thing. And away it goes. And then at that time, you're able to watch, instead of you being busy yourself, you're able to watch them.
Oh, I like that.
Right. And you're able to pause the video and say, hang on, check this, just do this or whatever, and then play again. And sometimes you can scrub through the video as well.
I like that. I like that idea.
And a whole nother idea for you as well is there an element of providing pre-recorded videos of certain elements that people can go at their own pace, and then they get to the real guts of what you do, and your area of genius is what you're bringing in that live event, where you're okay. Now you've done all this pre-work stuff. That's all great. And some people were able to turn it on to 2 times speed and fly through it. And some people were stopping and going back and then you got everyone to a consistent point. Everyone's at this point. That's what we
Wow.
want you to be, right? And now we're all able to leap off together into this next area, because we all got everyone, rather than the frustration in a workshop environment is that you have one person who's just struggling so much and they sap up all the time, and
Yep.
you've got all these other people who are wanting to speed ahead, and they're being dragged behind. There was a workshop that I was involved in with that group that I sent that link to, the office hours, and it was doing Raspberry Pi electronics. And what was really cool was everyone made the commitment that no one left behind. And what it meant was that in the steps that needed to happen, there was built into that, okay, now we're going to everyone stop at this point and make sure that everyone's at that point together. And then what happened is the community helped each other. And it was like, oh yeah, I just did that. Let me help you with that. And potentially you could then even put those 2 people in a breakout room for 10 minutes. And one person's going to help that other person while you're able to help someone else, and someone else is able to help someone else. And that community, that common experience will be electric. And that's where it'll grow and be amazing.
Well, I've learned so much just today. It's really got my brain going, and I appreciate it. And the only other thing that I really worry about doing a live is, having taught this nationally, is you have people on their machines, and it's like you say, there'll be one person with a machine that doesn't work properly. And that's probably my biggest concern, because I'm not in the room with them, and to solve their machine problem, I'm worried about that. Yeah,
But that
it's
to
gonna
me
go great. We're gonna do it.
It will, but that's a genuine concern that I think has high probability. And my thinking on that is 2 things. One is that would be an amazing value add pre-recorded video that you provide ahead of time, and that is like a specific little micro workshop on how to look after your machine and how to set it up to win. And so here's the things, and then here's the 5 things that are likely to go wrong, and here's what you do to fix those things. And when I say as a value add, it's almost like a lost leader, where you've made this 30-minute video, hour video, whatever, and that's worth $200, right? And that's a free gift for everyone that signs up. It's a masterclass in mastering your machine. And what we really want you to do is to watch that and to really understand it, so that you get where we're coming from, so that we minimize the problems that we have on the day. And one of those things is servicing or whatever it is. It's like, please don't come to this event with an old machine that you haven't used for 20 years. It needs to be well serviced, and these are the 5 things you need to look at to make sure that it's ready to work on the day, so that it doesn't, so you maximize our time together. Right? So it's just thinking about, it's a perfect example of a real challenge that you can have. So how can you be proactive to then say, this is what we're going to do, and then set the level of expectation. That is, it's possible that you're going to have a problem with your machine, and it's a train wreck for you at the event, and there is a couple of things that I may be able to do to help, but be prepared that if you go down, that I may not be able to help you, and perhaps you could have some sort of backup strategy. Maybe you can call in a friend and have a backup machine ready to be able to use, or whatever that is. But that sets the level of expectation for them. They know that there could come a point where they're not going to monopolize your time, where you're trying to troubleshoot their machine problem, but you're going to
Well,
say,
80% of the time it is user error. I
right,
would actually say probably 95% of the time it's
Yeah.
user error and getting them through that. And I'm going to let you all go. But the last thing I want to throw is I was thinking about selling this to actual quilt shops where they had a class in the shop and I'm on TV.
Mhm.
And that was possibly to solve that problem to where there is somebody in the room. But I love the idea of having a tech check, Sarah, that a tech check video. I think that's brilliant. And yeah, make that part of the tech check.
There is
Thank you,
something
guys.
there's something about the hybrid, or kind of that, the hub type model, where you have a few people together in one location, and they're all connecting. And there's a lot of pros and cons. And so yes, there's a pro, particularly with a technical thing that you're talking about, and having assistance there, right there. There is a challenge with the different type of experience that people are having. I definitely prefer what you're saying, is that they still would be interacting with you through a screen, which I think is important. If you were to say, I'm going to go run it from a store, and then everyone else is going to join, well, immediately that wouldn't work as well, I would say. And that's because all of the people that are online would feel like they are they're at the kiddie table at Thanksgiving, right? Because you're with all the adults at the table and you're doing all of that and you're helping those people, and the kids are kind of left to their own devices. And so what you were saying is, no, you would be on the screen and everyone would interact with you through a screen, and that means that it's more like a common experience for everyone. So, but yeah, there's something also, I feel like, that when everyone is experiencing it the same way, everyone's at home, everyone's potentially by themselves, and they're all engaging with each other and things. But yeah, I think that the tech help video, because the other thing that you could do, someone has a problem with with something, is you could say, hey, I've sent you this 5-minute video. Go and watch that now, right? Like, just pause this for a second, watch that video, and that's gonna go step by step, and then that frees you up, right? Like you're then like, go and do that. Make sure you've done those 10 steps, and if you do all those 10 steps and you've still got a problem, then now come back and talk to me. That's just like time shifting your expertise and stuff. So anyway, I'm super pumped. I'm really excited about the types of things that people are using the platform to do. So go team. All right. Well, it's midnight here. Can I go to bed yet? You're all like, you're the one that keeps talking. What do you mean? Well, we haven't kept you up. That's great. There's some awesome questions there, and I'm super excited about how people are using the platform and how they're changing the world through it. So go team. Thank you, Heather. You hung in there. Got all the questions read. Well done. All right. Next week it'll be 5 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. So it'll be early for me then. All right. Bye.
Bye.